You probably walked past this already. Full cart, normal Tuesday. Nothing dramatic on the shelf, but there are 5 things at Walmart that smart preppers have quietly stopped reaching for, and it has nothing to do with panic. It's about which version of each item is still worth trusting. And the last one is sitting in almost every cart in America, which is exactly why almost nobody notices what's actually changed about it. This isn't about a shelf going empty. It's about a shelf still being full of the wrong version. Inflated, thinned out, or quietly swapped, while the smart move is walking past it instead of grabbing it out of habit. Watch the format, not just the presence of the item. 5 items. 5 completely different reasons to skip what's right in front of you. Number 5. Frozen cauliflower/frozen vegetables. Start with the freezer aisle, because this is the one most people already have a story about. The bin is labeled, the barcode scans, and the bag just isn't there. Not once, but for weeks in a row. Smart shoppers have learned not to plan meals around it anymore, and that's a bigger shift than it sounds. This one crept up because everybody started reaching for the same substitute at the same time. Riced cauliflower became the easy stand-in for rice and grain-based sides, and demand climbed, right as weather made a genuinely fussy crop even harder to grow reliably. Shoppers have described the same freezer slot sitting empty for 3 straight weeks at a warehouse store. And when it finally comes back, the texture and quality are noticeably worse than before. Most people assume that's a one-store fluke. It isn't. It's a pattern. Demand outrunning a crop that doesn't tolerate bad weather well. In real time, aisle by aisle. The shelf signal to watch is simple. The same freezer spot, empty trip after trip, while everything around it restocks normally. That's your tell to stop counting on it. At home, this shows up as a recipe built around a healthy filler vegetable that just isn't reliably there. The smart move is avoiding it as a dependable staple altogether right now. Lean on fresh cauliflower when it's actually available, or shift that slot in your rotation to a vegetable with a steadier supply. Don't build a plan around a bag that might not show up. But if a fully tagged, fully barcoded vegetable can become this unreliable, what happens to something whose cheap version is being pushed out on purpose? Number 4. Canned pineapple, canned fruit. Here's the mistake almost everyone still makes with canned fruit. They check if it's on the shelf, grab it out of habit, and never look at what it costs compared to 6 months ago. Smart shoppers have started walking right past this one. Canned pineapples sourced from Southeast Asia has climbed roughly a quarter in price, not because of one problem, but 2 stacking on top of each other. Weather hurt the crop. Tariffs hit the import. 2 separate pressures, landing on the exact same can, at the exact same time. That's not a blip you wait out. That's a can that keeps climbing every time you look at it. Most shoppers miss this because canned fruit isn't a headline item the way eggs or gas prices are. Nobody's tracking it, which is exactly why it's worth a second look. The shelf signal here isn't an empty spot. It's a smaller can sitting at the same price point where a bigger one used to be. Same shelf, same brand, quieter portion, same habit, keeping people from noticing. At home, this shows up slowly. A pantry stocking plan built around imported canned fruit ends up costing more per shelf than it used to, which means the same budget buys less of it over time. The smart move is avoiding the imported version while the price keeps compounding, and shifting toward domestically sourced canned or dried fruit instead, something with only 1 cost pressure on it instead of 2. And here's the part that should bother you a little. This is imported. A weather problem on the other side of the world, one you'll never hear about on the news, can still show up on your grocery receipt months later. If a can of fruit can carry 2 hidden cost pressures at once, what happens to a product that isn't imported at all, one that's grown and processed almost entirely inside one already stressed domestic industry? Number 3. Ground beef, the plain, affordable version. Picture the meat case. You reach for the same tray you always buy, and something's different. It's not labeled as a shortage, it's labeled as a blend. The U.S. cattle herd is sitting near its lowest level in decades heading into this year, and that's pushed beef prices to record highs. Stores haven't responded by simply raising the price on plain ground beef and calling it a day. Some Walmart locations are now placing a cheaper beef and pork blend right next to the pure ground beef, a new budget option where there used to be only one option. That's exactly the trap smart shoppers are learning to sidestep. The package still says ground meat. A quick glance at the price sticker misses the ingredient shift entirely. The blend looks like the deal, And it's actually the thing to walk past, not because it's unsafe, but because it isn't what your recipe or your stockpile plan is expecting. The shelf signal is a second SKU appearing where there used to be one, a blend, sitting beside the beef you thought was your only choice. At home, the consequence is small but real. A stew or a chili turns out different than it used to, and you don't figure out why until you go back and actually read what you bought. The smart move is avoiding the blend, reading the label every single time instead of trusting the tray's position in the case, and buying pure ground beef in bulk, only when it's clearly labeled and reasonably priced, then freezing it in meal-sized portions. Skip the shelf that looks stable. It isn't. A protein swap is one thing. But what happens when the item at risk isn't food at all? It's the thing that keeps your food usable in the first place. Number 2. Aluminum foil, food storage wrap. Nobody puts foil on a shortage watch list. It's not food. It's not on anyone's radar. And that's exactly why smart shoppers are the only ones noticing what's happened to it. Reynolds Wrap raised prices roughly 13%, and the company pointed directly at tariffs, global supply pressure, and rising energy costs. A big piece of that is a 50% tariff, now sitting on Canadian aluminum, one of the main sources feeding the U.S. market. The name brand roll got more expensive for basically the same reason an imported car did. Nobody connects those two things, but the price line tells the same story either way. This is the first item on the list that isn't food at all, and that's exactly why it's easy to overpay for out of pure habit. Preparedness isn't only about what's in the pantry. It's about the boring infrastructure that keeps that food usable, and habit is what's costing people here. The shelf signal is subtle. A smaller roll at the same price, or a generic store brand foil quietly disappearing, while the name brand hangs on at a much higher cost. Smart shoppers are skipping the name brand roll entirely right now and hunting down whatever store brand or heavier duty bulk option is still priced reasonably, instead of grabbing the familiar box out of routine. At home, the consequence of not adjusting shows up around leftovers and bulk cooked meals, food made in a big batch with no good, affordable way to actually store or freeze it right, because the roll in the cart costs twice what it should have. A storage system depends on packaging just as much as it depends on food, and packaging is exposed to trade costs that food itself often isn't. If a roll of foil can get quietly reshaped by forces most shoppers never think about, what happens to the one item that's already sitting in almost every cart, every single week? Number 1. Coffee, the everyday can or bag, not the specialty bag. This is the one. Not because it's dramatic, because it isn't. Maxwell House ground Colombian coffee rose 46% in a single year. K-Cups rose 34%. That's not a rounding error, and it's not a niche specialty item. That's the everyday can sitting in the same spot in the pantry it's sat in for years, nearly doubling, quietly, while everyone was watching beef and eggs instead. The reason it moved that hard comes down to weather in the regions that grow at erratic rainfall, disrupting a global commodity that most people never think about until the receipt does the talking. A coffee can went up more than beef did, and it never made a single headline. This is why coffee earns the final spot, and why it's the item smart preppers have quietly stopped buying on autopilot. It's not glamorous. It's not prepper-coded in any way. It's a routine, an emotional anchor to the start of the day, which is exactly why people keep grabbing the same brand out of habit even as the price creep gets worse. Nobody frames coffee as a crisis item, so nobody's adjusting for it. That's precisely the pattern this entire list has been pointing at. The useful, affordable version breaks first, quietly, in the item nobody thought to track. The shelf signal is the same one you've seen all list long. A smaller bag at the same price, or the store brand version thinning out while the name brand holds its shelf space at a much steeper cost. Smart shoppers are avoiding the specific formats that spiked hardest, K-Cups especially, and shifting toward the larger ground container or a store brand, treating price stability as the actual buying signal instead of brand loyalty. So here's how it all connects. Storage tools like foil are useless if you overpay for them out of pure habit. Protein gets undermined by a quiet substitution most people never read closely enough to catch. Preserved goods can carry two hidden cost pressures stacked on top of each other, which is reason enough to shift away from them. Produce can become unreliable for weeks, even while the shelf tag stays right where it's always been. And the most routine item on the entire list, the one in almost every kitchen, turned out to prove the whole point. Boring and safe from disruption are not the same thing, And habit is the thing actually costing you. You don't need to overhaul your whole cart today. On your next trip, pick just one item from this list and actually check the unit price and the label before you grab it out of habit. That's it. That's the whole shift. So tell me, which of these 5 have you already started avoiding at your store, and what are you buying instead? Shelves don't have to look empty for a shortage to have already started. The useful version goes first, quietly, and the smartest shoppers are the ones who stopped reaching for it before everyone else caught on.